This is part 2 of the Blender Beginner series. In part 1 we talked a lot about how to move and scale and rotate an object, whether we're an object or in edit mode, how to apply scale, how to flip polys so that they're facing outwards. We talked about beveling with the modifier or doing it manually, and we talked a little bit about materials and lighting and rendering. And I want to talk more in this part about how to approach creating a model or a scene using the primitives that we have available. So, for example, if I press Shift A, you can see my screen keys down here tell me what I'm pressing. So if I press Shift A and I go to Mesh because we want to add a mesh, you can see that we have a plane. So I'll just put that in. I'm going to come over here and turn on Move in case that's not available. I'm just going to slide it down on the Y. Shift A, Mesh, Cube, and that's the one that we start with by default. Shift A, Mesh, Circle. That one, let's just move that up there. Shift A, Mesh, UV Sphere. Shift A, Mesh, Icosphere. I don't use that one very often, but it has its uses. Cylinder. Those are the main ones that I would tend to use, all right, with the exception of that. So how do you know when to use these? Well, first of all, you have to be able to know how to move around in the Blender environment, how to scale these things. Again, I tend to scale them in edit mode, all right, because if I press N here and I come over to item, you can see that for this cylinder the scale is 1 by 1 by 1, and if I go into edit mode and I scale this in the Z, pressing SZ, and I just want it taller and I do this, I can do it that way. If I come back here, my scale is still 1, 1, and 1, so although I've made it larger, I haven't changed it here, and that way the modifiers are going to react properly with it versus scaling it in object mode. Now, of course, I could do it that way, or I could come into edit mode and I could press something like 3 for face selection and grab that face and pull it up. Or I could press GZ or GZ. I could do it that way, and I'm still 1 by 1 by 1. So yeah, you have to know how to scale and rotate and stuff like that. But what I want to talk about, I'm going to delete all these things. I'm going to press N to close that. Let's have a look at an image here. All right. In this image, let's say you wanted to model something like this. You have to ask yourself, well, how am I going to create these shapes? And most likely you are going to come to the idea that you're going to use either a cylinder or a circle or a combination. Many of these parts or structures or objects are circles or cylinders or some kind of modified circle or cylinder. Now there are going to be some other shapes in here. So for example, this one looks like it's a rectangle of sorts, maybe a plane that's extruded, or maybe a cube that's flattened, and then we have some changes to those shapes. But the predominant shape here, all these pipes and these parts of the tank, whatever, are circles or cylinders. So for example, if you wanted to create the main body here, this piece that goes across, you could start with the cylinder. So you would go Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder. But before you move it or do anything, you click down here, Add Cylinder, and you get this dialog box. And this, you can change some values here. So for example, the number of vertices, you may not want to have 32 vertices in this. You may want to lower it now, especially if you're going to be putting on a subdivision surface. But even if not, shade smooth with some beveling can give you quite a nice effect. So let's say instead of 32 we chose 22. So I pressed 22 and I pressed enter, and now when I go into edit mode, if I press 1 for vertex mode, if I was to count all these up, I would have 22 vertices here. and I would have 22 vertices here. And if I press 3 for face selection, if I select, there's the 22 vertices and a single plane. Now, these pieces here are called quads. If I go back into number 1, because there are 4, quad is 4 points or 4 vertices making up this polygon. Poly referring to many faces or many sides. So these are all polygons, but this one is a many-sided polygon. It's not a quad, and it's not a tri, which is 3. It's, I don't know what 22 is. It's many, so it's called an n-gon. And this can create problems if your model has to be animated or if it has to be deformed. Not in this particular orientation. I mean, if you just wanted to animate this going up like that, that would not be a problem. But anyhow, if we wanted to create this structure over here, one thing that I often like to do, I'm going to go back in object mode, is bring in the reference image. So I'm going to press 1 to look from the front orthographic view. That means straight on. In other words, I don't want to be looking on an angle. I want to look straight from the front. And I'm going to press Shift A, come down to image, and I'm going to choose reference. And I'm going to navigate to where that image is, so on my desktop, and I'm going to load it. And then I'm going to press G, and I can just drag it wherever I want. And now I've got that image. I can S to scale it, G, drag it. Then that comes in and it's called empty. You can change that name if you want. You can hide it if you don't want to see it. And you can disable it from the render. I would generally just put it in there and then delete it afterwards. But now I don't have to flip back and forth between, coming down here. I can just see it there. I'm going to say, okay, so how am I going to create this? Well, I'm not going to create it on an angle or anything. That's just the way it's rendered. First of all, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to select it all, and I'm going to rotate this on its side. Now, the y-axis is pointing towards us. The z is up. The x is this way. So I want to rotate this around the y, RY 90, like that. And I'm going to S to scale it in all dimensions, x, y, and z, so it's equal. I'm going to scale it down to about that size, and then SX, maybe a little bit longer. So it kind of looks like this. Now when I look at this, I see, all right, it's a cylinder, but it's rounded here. How do I do that? All right, so let's come down here, and let's turn this a bit and press 3 for face selection and select that face. And since both ends appear to be rounded equally, I'm going to hold Shift and select that one as well. So let's round it. The way we're going to round this is by beveling. We're going to press Control B and pull our mouse. Now I'm going to roll my mouse up, and that'll start adding segments. And it's up to you how many you put in. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and that's probably enough. So I've added 3 sections in there. I'm going to click to accept. Now I'll zoom in and we'll count. So I have this edge, this one, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to press Alt-A to deselect and come back. Now that may not be long enough for the exact shape, but if I take this and now shade smooth, that looks pretty good. Alright, so I have created the main part of this. Alright, right here, that part. Now what am I going to do for this? Well, this looks like a short piece of a cylinder rounded, just like this. So how could I do that? Well, one thing you could do is you could go back into edit mode and you could say, all right, I need a small piece of this. Well, maybe we can copy this. Let's try in face selection, selecting this. I'm going to need more of it than that. I'm going to need it to come from the middle outwards to about there. How are we going to do that? What if I select that, and then if I press Control plus, that will increase my selection. Control minus will decrease it. Control plus will increase it. What if I came out to about there? Let's see. Would that do it? Well, it really kind of flattens out. I might need maybe one more. Let's try this. Let's select all of that. And let's copy that. And the way we copy is Shift D. We duplicate. Shift D. Now it's right there on top of the rest. If I move it along the X, I have a copy of that. Pull it out a ways. And then now what I want to do is I want to make this a separate object so that I can edit it and it doesn't get, mixed up with this object. So I'm going to press P, separate, and just click the first option, selection. Go back into object mode. So I now have this piece and I have this piece. This one I want to make smaller and put on the front. So let's try that and see what happens. So let's go into edit mode by pressing tab, A to select it all, S to scale. Scale it just by eye, bring it closer, and then keep looking at your diagram and saying, what do I need to do? I think I need to flatten it. Looks like in the x-axis I need to flatten it, or scale it, in other words. So let's go S, X, and then pull your mouse in to make it flatter, out to make it bigger like that. Let's go like this. Try that. Go back into object mode, or just pull it in. See how you like it. And that looks something like this structure. Now, I'm going to come back. It looks to me like it's even flatter along here. So I'm going to press 2 for edge selection, and I want to select the edge that goes all the way around the circle. I don't want to do this. Click this one and then hold Shift and do this one and this one. Instead, I'm going to press Shift and Alt together. Shift and Alt, and then click there. What I'd like to do is extrude another section of this straight back. So I'm going to press E, left click, and pull in the X. Just a little bit like that. Now select it all and pull it in. And I have that piece on top, like this. Now, I have a feeling there's one at the back as well. I can't tell, but I have a feeling it's mirrored. It might not be, but let's try that. All right. My 3D cursor is right in the middle of this object. All right. I haven't moved it. And I want to mirror this right around this object to the other side. So I am going to, with my 3D cursor there, come to the modifiers and choose mirror. And I'm mirroring in the x-axis, and I have one on the other side. Now, if you want things to look cool, just come up and turn on the cavity shader, and it will look a little bit nicer. So we're creating this shape, and then we just go on and on. There's other pieces. There's this circle here. So let's think about how we could create that. It's all circles so far. Well, what if we came in here and pressed 3 for face selection, selected that, and say, well, that looks kind of like the circle. I mean, we could do something with that. Let's take this and copy it. Shift D to duplicate, pull it out away so it doesn't get confused with that. P, separate the first one by selection, back into object mode and select that. Now, I think that's a little big. I think we need to make it smaller. So let's go into edit mode, A to select it all. Doesn't matter if you're in vertex, edge, or face selection. And just press S and pull your mouse into the approximate size you want. Okay, so what do we need to do? All right, so it does look like a circle, and it looks like it's got some depth, and it also looks like there's a hole in the middle. So what if we, let's give it the hole first. Now, how are we going to make a hole in this? Well, fortunately, we can press I to inset, I, and then drag your mouse in, and that will create some geometry, that orange area inside, so it's insetted. And then just pull your mouse to the approximate size that you think it needs to be. I'm going to come back and look, and if that wasn't good enough, it's not the right size, you can just press S again and do it again. So let's go right about there, and let's press X and delete faces. So now if we press A, we have just the outer ring. Let's try that. Let's extrude it back to give it thickness and see how it looks. E, left click, pull in the X direction. Now, if it looks funny to you, it's because it's got any of the features we put on this before. It's going to have the mirror on it because we copied it from an object. We copied this from this, and this has a mirror, and it also has, we right-clicked, shade smooth on it. So it might look a little bit funny. If I go shade flat, that's what you would have expected. All right, so now that piece in itself doesn't look that good to me. Of course, we probably want it shade smooth, but it doesn't look very nice. And so let's, I'm going to actually flip back to here. And where did it go? There it is. And I'm going to zoom in a bunch. And we can look at any of them. We can look at this one here. All right, so it's a nice piece like this. We're going to need to bevel the edge so it's sharp, but it's got a little bit of smoothness. We can barely even see those edges. So what we could do is come in and press 2 for edge selection. I'll deselect everything, and I'm going to bevel this edge around here and this one. I'm not going to worry about the back because that's going to be pressed against. So Shift and Alt and click, and that selects the entire edge. And Shift and Alt and click. And when you do that, you don't lose your first selection. All right, so I'll do that again. Shift and Alt and click there, and Shift and Alt and click there. That's the part we want to bevel. So I'm going to go Control B and pull. And now it's up to me to decide how many segments. For this, I would probably put 1 segment in and have a relatively tight section there, or segment or area. So I've got really 3 edge loops that go all the way around that are edges, and that's probably good enough. If I come back out and I shade smooth, that's my object. Now it doesn't look very good on the end, and I'm having trouble seeing the back. So with it selected, I'm going to press the slash key. You've got the question mark and the slash. I'm just going to press the slash key. Now I can zoom in and I see the back. In fact, I can come in and select it and press the period key, and that will focus in on that. That doesn't look very good because the shade smooth, because I beveled the top and not the back. What I would probably do is delete these faces because we don't need them. So in face selection, I'm going to Shift and Alt and click. Get those faces, X faces, delete them, go and go slash again to bring everything back into object mode. And that looks okay now. So let's move that. The problem is I've got this mirrored, and so the way I'm going to move it is go into edit mode, A to select it all, and move this one in. And when I do that, it moves the mirrored one in, and we've got that structure there. All right, so we're just looking at how to create pieces, objects out of certain primitives, and we're seeing that many of these are circles. Now, of course, there are pipes, which are circles, and if they were just straight, you could just use a cylinder, but because they're bent, you have to deal with that in a certain way. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create a piece that went up and across and down, and all of this other stuff is just detail that really just is expanded circles or expanded cylinders or contracted cylinders, and we could work on that another time. But let's say I wanted to do that. You'd say, well, how am I going to get this to come up, bend over, and go down? And one of the ways that I like to do that to make pipes is using a plane. And you're saying, well, wait, a plane? Let's bring in a plane. Mesh, plane. There it is. Now that doesn't look like a pipe. Well, let's go into edit mode, make sure it's all selected, and let's rotate it so it's standing up. So I'm going to rotate around the y-axis, RY 90, and I have that. And then say, imagine my pipe came up, across, and down. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in to edge selection number 2, select this bottom edge, X edges, get rid of it. Now I'm going to select, and you'll see this orange line. It comes up, across, and down, and there's no bottom on it. Now that's not the exact dimensions I need here, but we're starting to see it, but it doesn't look like a pipe yet. So what I can do is press 1 for vertex selection and select this vertex, hold down Shift in this one, and these ones we're going to have to round. We're going to have to round this a little bit. All right, then it's not a 90 degree. All right, so Now, at this point, you just sort of by eye, you are going to round those. Shift Control B is how you bevel individual vertices. Shift Control B. Pull, and you can see them splitting. If you roll your mouse, you can add more points. I tend to have 5, and then you can pull your mouse up or down depending on how tight you want that curve. So I'm just going to put it there for now. All right, so again, this is still a plane now, sort of a rounded rectangle. Let's go back into object mode. All right, and we're going to convert this to a curve. But before I do that, I'm going to press 3 to look from one of the side views. Go into edit mode, A to select it all, and I'm going to scale this in the Y. Bring it in a little tighter, and I might even say pull it down in the Z. Maybe select these 2 points, pull them up till they're almost level. We're just making it look a little bit nicer. All right, I'm back in object mode. Let's make this look like a pipe. Right click on it, convert to curve. Come over to the curve icon here, scroll down to geometry, scroll down to bevel, depth, and hold down shift and click with your mouse and pull, holding shift so that we have more control, and pull it to the approximate width or size that you want. Shade smooth, right click, shade smooth, and we have created this pipe roughly. All right, there's other parts on there to do. Now, you can add a subdivision surface to smooth this out if you want. It's under the modifier tab, subdivision surface, and it just tightens it up a bit. You can do the same thing here. You can add a subdivision surface, and you can choose, you know, one or more subdivision surface. It looks a little nicer. This one, subdivision surface. And you will notice that this one has a mirror and a subdivision surface, and you can have more than one. I'm not going to do that for this one. All right, so we now have the beginnings of a pipe. Again, it's all very cylindrical and circular. All right, cool. Let's leave that behind and delete all this stuff and look at another image. This one here. When you go to model something, either from a reference image, which I highly recommend that you have references, a lot of my frustration I found in modeling is I start to do it, it just doesn't look good, I don't like it, I'm frustrated. And that's because I don't have good references. I'm not working from something, and I'm trying to sort of make it up from my mind, and I don't really know how it's supposed to look, and it ends up looking crappy. But when you have a reference, you sit down and you say, how am I going to make this shape? Let's say you want to do this computer monitor, this old-fashioned monitor. Well, I can't really see the back. I would want that if I could, and maybe even a top view. But I can see that this looks like a square or a rectangle with rounded edges. Well, we could do that. Another rectangle with rounded edges. Almost like a sphere of some sort. We'll have to think about that. There's another rectangle here, although it's pushed in. We'll have to think about how we would do that. Circular knobs, we could find a way to do that. All right, and the whole thing is kind of angled down. Yeah, we could do that. And all of this stuff, which looks really cool, is a lot of rectangles. Yes, with some cutaways and insets, but rectangles and squares and circles and pipes or wires that are done from the technique I just showed you. You know, a plane coming up with a point going in, bevel this point to make it rounded, convert it to a curve. So you start to say, you know what, I could handle most of these shapes. Now there are going to be shapes, for example, things like vehicles, characters, that are much more difficult. But for all this sort of hard surface modeling, you look at it and you decide, what primitives do I need? What shapes do I need? How am I going to manipulate those shapes, cut them, scale them, rotate them, that kind of thing, in order to create the model. So let's make a little bit of this TV screen. I think I'm just going to leave the image out here and not bring it into Blender. And it's not going to look exactly the same. We're going to do this kind of quick. I am going to start with a plane on its side with roughly those dimensions, and I'm going to round the edges. Let's do that. Okay, I'm just going to go Shift-A, Mesh Plane. You're going to look from the front. It's laying on its side. Go into Edit Mode. Make sure it's all selected. RX90. All right, that's a square. I don't want that. Scale it in the Z. And say, and as you're looking at it, going, does that look a little bit like a computer screen? Okay, maybe that. Okay, now, a computer screen is not just flat. So first of all, I'm going to extrude it backwards in the Y to give it some thickness. E to extrude, pull back. And you know what? Let's have another look at this. It looks like there's a flat section, and then it curves down. And flat section underneath, and then it curves up. Let's assume it curves down and up the same amount. That makes it a little bit easier. So let's make that our front section, our flat section. And then let's extrude out again. E to extrude, come out. And let's now just press S. See what happens. We pulled it in. Hey, that looks a little bit like an old-fashioned computer model. That looks great. Deselect. Okay, we're on our way. What are we going to do? These corners are definitely too sharp. We also need the cutaway in the middle. Let's work on that. Let's click on the face button. Select that face. We need to make a space in there. Like this. We need to come in this far and then push in. I'm not going to make all of this, but okay, let's press I to inset. Pull it in. How much? Well, it's up to you. There, something like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to extrude E, and you can gesture in the axis. I'm gesturing in the Y axis. I'm going to pull it back to there. Sometimes it's a nice touch to go S and scale it a little bit. There's not always just flat walls going back. I'm going to leave it like that, and we have the start of our computer monitor. Now, like I said before, these edges are too sharp, so into edge selection, I'm going to Shift Alt and click. That will select the edge all the way along there, and it will even go inside, and that's exactly what I want. All four of these corners are going to be beveled, and I'll show you over here. See the way they're rounded? All right, so let's do that. Select them all, and it's Control B, not Shift Control B. Control B, hold down Shift if you want to move slower, roll your mouse back to 0. Get a space in there, and then roll your mouse up. I tend to use a total of 5, like that. Let's deselect and come out and look. We've rounded these. Now it looks faceted. There are these white lines. Now a lot of that is also the cavity shader as well. It just accentuates the edges, but we're going to have to smooth this later. I don't want to leave these edges sharp. I want them rounded as well. So I would come in and in edge selection, Shift Alt and click this one, and Shift Alt and click this one, and bevel those as well. Control B. Not too much, just a little bit. I'll use the same number of segments, 5, as I did here. And now it's starting to look really nice. Now you can do that on the back as well. I wouldn't leave the back. I would select this edge, Shift Alt and click, and Control B, pull a little bit, and now you're getting something that looks really nice. All right, now you could select this and shade smooth, and if you get this kind of shadowy look, you have some shading errors, and this like what looks like a triangle. And what you need to do then is come over to the modifiers, click on weighted normal, and also under normals, auto smooth, and that should fix it. And if it doesn't fully fix it, remember you may be removing faces later. So for example, if I was going to do some work here and I didn't need this face because there are other things here and it's cut away and there's like a circle, I'm probably not going to use that face. So if I delete that, that problem is now gone. But we also have a weird shadow here. Well, that's where that edge is. And anyhow, there's a little bit of a gap here. So in edge selection, number 2, select that. And I'm going to Control B to bevel, pull, but roll my mouse back to 0. So there's just the space and the 2 edges on the outside. Get a space that you think is the right amount. And then we're going to inset this in or extrude it in. We're going to press E, click. Alt-S is for scaling along the normal and push either down, that's pushing it out, or up, one or the other. You just have to figure out which one pulls it in. Like that, not too far. All right, this is the effect we're getting. We're getting that cutaway, but these are very sharp edges, and so we're going to bevel those. So deselect everything, and then Shift and Alt and click that edge, Shift and Alt and click that edge, and it should go all the way around, and then zoom in very close, and move it around, and then Control B to bevel, pull, put in one segment maybe, and you now have that. And you fix that shading problem, and it's starting to look like a TV. All right, so the point here then is figuring out what shape you need, what primitive you need to build this, rounding edges and following your references. And you could do that for all of these structures here. You've got, pipe-like structures or curves. You've got circles. Let's do a quick knob. Let's say, let's look at this. Say where we could put a knob. Well, it's really on the inside. So let's just say we needed a knob right here. There on top. We'll do it on the side. Some kind of weird thing here. All right. I will show you a little trick, and that is to bring your 3D cursor where you want your next object to appear. So let's go into edit mode. Let's Alt-A to deselect. Let's press 3 for face selection and select this face. When you have a face selected or a point selected or an edge selected, if you press Shift-S and right down at the bottom it says cursor to selected, that means bring the 3D cursor to what is selected. It'll bring it right into the middle of that. Now my 3D cursor is there. Even in object mode, my 3D cursor is there. And this is the point that new objects are brought in, or new meshes. So if I go Shift-A, Mesh, Circle, the circle is brought in at that point. Its middle is right there, although we want to change some stuff here. I don't want 32. I want maybe 18 vertices. Now, how do you know how many? Well, because 16 or 18 with shade smooth alone is going to look fine, or with a subdivision surface, even better. Let's go into edit mode and 1. I tend to use 1 because I can see it very well, all the vertices. S to scale and pull. Get it to the approximate size you want. Let's rotate this RY90. Feel free to pull it out away. Say, okay, that's about the size I want. Now we're going to create a knob. How are we going to do this? I'm going to press E, left click, pull, and I'm going to S to scale it down a little bit like that. Yeah, that's okay. And there's many types of knobs, so I'm just going to do it this way. E and S, pull in. E, I'm going to push back in the X direction a little bit, and S, because I want those angled a bit. And let's just go F to make a face. And we have the beginning of a knob. All right, let's do a little bit more work on this. I can't see the back. Let's press slash. Now we have just that. Back into edit mode. Let's press 2 for edge selection. Shift and Alt and click that edge. Let's do something to sort of close that off a bit. Let's press E and S and come in. And then let's make a little post that knob would use to connect to the rest of the computer monitor. E and pull back. Now I think I moved that a bit. So let's do E and pull it back. Okay, these are too sharp. So I'm going to select all my sharp edges, which are basically these ones. And we'll bevel. Control B. Let's pull, and let's have just one extra segment in the middle, so a total of 3. And let's look at that. How about if we put on Control 1? Control 1 is one subdivision. I could have gone Add Modifier, Subdivision Surface, Shade Smooth, and some of it is looking really good, but because Subdivision Surface tries to round everything, it looks a little bit too round. So what you need to do at that point is come in and bring in and add edge loops in various positions. So for example, if I hover my mouse over this region because of this kind of amorphous rounded part here, I'm going to bring an edge loop in here. I'm going to go Control R. That is the command for edge loop. Click, and I can drag along, and it will follow the general pattern, and I can put that down there, and that looks a lot better. I can also Control R here and pull one in, and it looks even tighter. Okay, so that looks good. Let's see what else we can do. Well, this part here, I don't know if you can see, it almost looks like a flower. We need to do something here because the subdivision surface here doesn't really know exactly what to do, or it's stretching over too much area. So I'm going to turn that back on. Actually, I'm going to turn it off. It's easier. Let's bring an edge loop in here. Control R and slide it down. And let's have a look at that. All right, not bad. Really what we need to do is select this face and I to inset and pull it in. And we now have a knob. Select it, push it in however you want it. If I turn on the shadow, we may get a bit of a shadow off that. There it is. All right. So we've dealt with a few different shapes and a few different techniques. The main gist of all of this is looking at an object saying, I want to model that. What am I going to do? They're only made of shapes. I have cylinders or curves or pipe-like things, a lot of them here. All right. Yes, I have a bit of an odd shape here. Maybe I'm not going to model that exactly. Maybe I'm going to do it another way that I know how. Don't worry about it. Don't stress over it and not make a model because you don't know how to model that piece. And if you get a model that you're struggling over and you just can't figure it out, don't do it. Don't keep that as part of your portfolio. Chuck that. Forget about it. Say, you know what? I don't do cars. I don't do plants. Don't worry about it right now. Just do what you do and make beds. Bed after bed after bed after bed. And get good at doing that. And then you move on and you say, oh man, I've done a lot of pipes, a lot of curved pipes. You find something else with curved pipes. Do those. And anything you can't do, yeah, of course, watch tutorials and practice. Don't fret about it. Just say, I'm not doing it. I don't feel like doing it. I don't know how to do it. All right? Anyways, all these very common things that you can do. All right, so that's going to be it for part 2. I hope you're enjoying the series. If you want to give me some ideas for the next part, I'll try to work them in. Otherwise, see you again soon.